Hi everyone, my name is Will Jardell and I work at the USC Institute on Inequalities in Global Health. And every year we offer a wide range of opportunities to students. And today we have a fantastic group of those students who are going to talk about their experiences with the Institute, the work that they did, and some of the takeaways that they brought away from the experience going into their professional careers. So, like I said, my name is William Jardell. We have Dr. Shubha Kumar, the Director of Education for the Institute. We have Brianna Richardson, one of our fellows, Allison Schultz, Andrew Luang, Abigail Martichenko from the SDG Leadership Academy, and then also Gaia Morales from the SDG Leadership Academy and also the Student Advisory Council. So some really cool experiences that they'll be sharing about and the work that they've done, and also those key takeaways. First, just to highlight the Institute, the vision of the Institute is a university-wide center of excellence in global health research, education, and policy engagement that takes a dynamic and multidisciplinary approach to addressing the health disparities and inequalities that impact our world. One of the aspects of our mission is training the next generation of global health leaders, and that's what this is to showcase all the work that we're doing that allows the next generation of leaders to get experience and through all of our programs. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Shubha Kumar to talk a little bit more about the experiences and programs that we offer.
Great, thanks, Will, and thank you all for being here today. As Will mentioned, I'm the Director of Education for the Institute on Inequalities in Global Health, and I wanted to share with you just a range of opportunities we offer in this space. So as many of you may know and participate in, we have an undergraduate degree in global health. There's also graduate degrees related to global health, whether they be in Master's of Public Health, Master's of Global Medicine, et cetera. We also offer several courses abroad. Through IIGH, there's opportunities for students to go to Geneva and attend the World Health Assembly, as well as interact with key governance institutions. We also offer a course in Costa Rica, where students get the opportunity to interact with from local communities to the Ministry of Health to various institutions in between. And both of those courses are typically offered in the summer. And we are looking to expand some of those course opportunities to other regions. We also offer some unique courses in collaboration with the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, wherein these are both two online courses, one of them on global health leadership, one of them on global health ethics. And what's unique about these courses is that we partner with about 4 to 5 universities around the world for each of these courses, including universities from Mexico and several in East Asia and South Asia, where we all take the class together and get a chance to really learn from experts who are practicing in the field, as well as our faculty across these institutions, and for students to be able to work with other students in these different regions. So they're fantastic classes. I'd encourage you all to sign up for those if you have the chance. We also offer some online short courses through the Institute, including a course on the use of drones in global health, as well as non-communicable diseases. We have a really exciting opportunity that's actually approaching quite soon, is the Global Health Case Competition. So this is an intramural case competition that USC students from across the university form teams and participate in at the USC level, and then the winning team within the USC competition is then supported to go out to Emory for the Global Health Case Competition that they host there, which invites several universities from across the world to participate. It's a really exciting event. It's coming up this February 19th. We have a mixer that's coming up for that too, so I encourage you all to participate. You've probably seen the emails and social media posts about it already, and I really encourage you all to participate. It's quite a fun event, and I know our students get a lot out of it. We also offer several fellowships through the Bremen Fellowship Program, as well as the Anderson Fellowship Program, which these fellowships support students to do research in other countries as related to global and public health. And you're going to be hearing from one of those students who received this fellowship today. We offer internships such as the SDG Leadership Academy. You'll be hearing from 3 of those students today, so I won't say too much about that. Better you hear it from them. And the Institute also works with several agencies to help MPH students set up their practica. So for those of you who don't know, MPH students are all required to do a practicum, which is essentially kind of like an internship for about 300 hours as related to their degree. And the Institute helps set up a lot of the students who are interested in pursuing global health opportunities, whether it's with WHO or other UN agencies or local NGOs, or agencies in Los Angeles for that matter. So we have several connections through our faculty and our network where we are happy to pair students. The Institute, we also offer research opportunities, whether they're voluntary, paid opportunities through some of our grants, and also our faculty teach the directed research courses, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, for those of you who may be interested. And then we have a fantastic speaker series. So hopefully many of you get to attend those events or check out the recordings, but we have awesome speakers from all around the world who are doing great work in global health and inequalities who come speak with us. This year it's been primarily online, and in the past it's been in person, and we hope to continue to do a combination of both in the future. But we get some really amazing people. And we also actually have a weekly event called This Week in Global Health, where our director, Sophia Greskin, interviews with folks who are practicing in the field. And that's also an excellent opportunity to kind of learn more from the voices who are working in this space. So as you can see, we have a lot of education opportunities that we offer through the Institute. It's something we're very passionate about, and we're constantly looking for more ideas, and thrilled that we have the Student Advisory Council who works with us to give us ideas and to help implement some of these opportunities. And I won't say much more about that because you're going to be hearing from them directly, but just wanted to give you an overview. And at this point, I will turn it over back to Will.
Great. Thank you. So right now we have our very first speaker, and that is Brianna Richardson, who received the Bremen Global Health Fellowship.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brianna. So I was a fellow spring 2020, my last semester in the program, and I went to Costa Rica to do a project for the Ministry of Health in Corredores. And so my project is called Para Vivir una Pura Vida, which means to live a pure life. Pura vida is a common phrase in Costa Rica. That's a greeting. Also, it's pretty much symbolic to the lifestyle there. And I did a literature review and recommendation report on adolescent suicide prevention strategies. So the main objective of my project was to answer the question, what is a culturally appropriate adolescent suicide prevention strategy, and what recommendations should the Ministry of Health in Corredores consider when implementing the suggested strategy? So I answered this question by first doing a literature review of about 45 articles exploring the risk factors for adolescent suicide prevention, as well as the best strategies for adolescent suicide prevention. There was not a lot of data that was specific to Costa Rica, and definitely not really specific to Corredores. So I had to look at similar contexts in Latin America. And then to further triangulate the data, I wanted to send a survey out to relevant professionals in Costa Rica. They were originally supposed to be key informant interviews, but COVID happened, so I had to switch it to a survey. And so the professionals that I sent it out to were either in the Ministry of Health, they worked at PANI, which is the National Institute for Child Welfare, or were in the psychiatry field, or school administration. So for that survey, I wanted to see whether the strategies that I found in the literature review, if they were deemed as acceptable to actual professionals who would be the ones implementing such a strategy. Also, I wanted to see if there was any underlying nuances that maybe obstacles that adolescents in Corredores face that are different from adolescents in other areas. And then I boiled that down into recommendations, and as well as outlined a possible intervention that the Ministry of Health could implement. And on this slide here, it pretty much underscores the importance for such a project. As you can see on the chart, that the suicide rate in Corredores is much higher than the national suicide rate. And then also on the map, you can see that Corredores has a moderate suicide rate when compared to other cantons, which are like counties in Costa Rica. And even the neighboring county, Golfito, is much, much lower suicide rate than Corredores. So that made it even more interesting to explore. I did really dive deep into the risk factors for adolescent suicide prevention, and I found a lot of really interesting risk factors that I would have never considered. But for the interest of time, I won't go into it because I can talk all day about that. But so for adolescent suicide prevention strategies, these are the 5 different types of strategies that I explored. And community-based interventions and school-based interventions were the 2 that I really highlighted the most in my intervention example, because one, they were deemed as appropriate based on the survey results, and also they were both found to be very effective in the literature when used together. And so for the survey results, the results pretty much highlight or emphasize what was found in the literature. And so 73% of people who participated in the survey said that the best method is to combine multiple strategies. I also asked them about peer-based methods, like doing peer gatekeeper training, because that was something that the Ministry of Health was interested in. And 14 out of 15 participants said that they believed that that would be a good strategy to include in the intervention. The one person who didn't say that it was a good strategy, he didn't completely rule it out, but he was a bit hesitant because he questioned the maturity of adolescents and the responsibilities of dealing with gatekeeper training. Also, something interesting that came out of the survey results was that family dynamics was the most reported obstacle for adolescents that may be a risk factor for adolescent suicide. So I definitely incorporated that in my intervention example. So then my recommendations. So these are some of the recommendations that I suggested. Regional collaboration was a big one because Corredores is on the border of Costa Rica and Panama. So it only makes sense to really include Panama in some of the work, since the border is very porous and there's a large migrant farmer population. Also, Corredores is within the Brunca region, which is a cultural region named after the indigenous Baruca people. And since it's within that region that also is on that border with Panama, it would be helpful if they did some comprehensive health surveillance system disaggregated by indigenous group, because that has not yet been done. Also, having a multi-pronged intervention is something I suggested. That was in the literature and almost every article, that you can't just use one strategy, you have to intervene on multiple levels. So I did utilize the social ecological model when I did create my intervention outline. And then also getting more Costa Rica-based research was something I really, really emphasized in my presentation to the Ministry of Health. There's a huge gap in the data when it comes to adolescent mental health research coming out of Costa Rica. Also, doing some CBPR work I thought would be useful. Getting the community involved in any way possible would be helpful to decrease the stigma that exists there regarding mental illness, as well as training different people in the community to be gatekeepers. And then to evaluate whatever they choose to implement, to evaluate it regularly, because especially with adolescents, the obstacles that they face can change very quickly. And even now with the pandemic, I'm sure the obstacles look much different than they would have 2 years ago. And so this is a little bit of the outline of the intervention example that I came up with. And so I called it Camino, which means path or way. And I kind of made this analogy for life being like a road with many twists and turns and obstacles, but no matter what, there's always a way. So that's kind of the slogan that's there. En el viaje de vida siempre hay un camino. In the journey of life, there's always a way. And I emphasize this type of messaging to kind of take the stigma out of it, to help it be more accessible to adolescents. That's also why I use the bright colors. And then I incorporated mountains in the background as something that's familiar to them, because it reminds them of their landscape of where they live. So then for the individual level, I suggested doing a print media and social media campaigns, as well as enrolling adolescents in a text reminder service to inform them of mental health resources in corredores. This could include alternative forms of wellness, such as art therapy. For the interpersonal level, I suggested doing peer gatekeeper training. So training adolescents over the summer so they can be gatekeepers for the next school year, providing some sort of incentive for that. And that training would cover basic mental illnesses, as well as the QPR model, which is question, persuade, refer. And then incorporating role playing is also a crucial factor that came up a lot in the literature because it helps to take the stigma out of it and to promote confidence. I also suggested doing a parenting curriculum since in the survey, family dynamics came up a lot as a potential risk factor for adolescent suicide. So training the parents to be gatekeepers, but also teaching them how to empower their children, promote resilience, and understanding obstacles that adolescents face. Then for the institutional level, I suggested doing two different school-based curricula. So one being an essential skills training, and that would be not specific to mental illness, but to promote protective factors for mental illness, such as positive coping mechanisms, increasing help-seeking behavior, high self-esteem, body positivity, etc. And since this is not specific to mental illnesses, this could start at a younger age, such as age 10, and can be adapted each year for maturity. Then for the suicide prevention and awareness curriculum, that one would be specific to suicide prevention and talk about different mental illnesses, how to help friends going through that, and also how to recognize certain risk factors in yourself, which would start at adolescence, being age 12. And then for the community level, I suggested conducting an evaluation on screening and referral protocols in the IIGH throughout corredores. And the IIGH is like the health centers where all the different health professionals are. And also to create a surveillance system to compile epidemiological data disaggregated by sex, age, indigenous group, etc. Also creating a CBPR task force and facilitating community gatekeeper training. So that was pretty much my project in a nutshell. I really enjoyed this experience, probably my favorite one throughout the whole MPH. Really also a proud moment for me. The Ministry of Health did say that they could see themselves implementing something very similar to this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Brianna. That was great. Now we have Allison from the SDG Leadership Academy.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Allison Schultz. I am so honored to be here today to share a little bit about the research I conducted this past summer with the Institute through the SDG Leadership Academy. This project was conceived because the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals promise to leave no one behind, yet the framework is silent on specific issues faced by the LGBTQIA+ community, and the LGBTQIA+ community is not specifically included in the SDG targets or indicators. And while the international framework fails to directly mention LGBTQIA+ populations, local governments have the flexibility to localize global goals and fit their own priorities and values. So this past summer, the city of LA took on this challenge and assembled a team to learn more about where they could leverage their voluntary local review of the SDGs to be more inclusive to LGBTQIA+ Angelenos. So our team this summer was composed of our city client, Angela Kim, who was our main liaison with the city, our faculty sponsor, the wonderful Professor Sophia Gruskin, and student consultants, including myself, Nitrin Kushenker from USC, John Hammer Alejo Magini from Occidental, and Lily Sarvastani from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at the Arizona State University. So our objective was this: to draw on best practices of other cities and new data sources to improve measures of impact, inclusion, and representation of LGBTQIA+ Angelenos in city services. So we approached this goal through two main projects. The first was conducting case studies of cities around the world on what they do to support their LGBTQIA+ residents. And the second, to identify indicators in the LA voluntary local review that could be disaggregated for LGBTQIA+ people to ensure that no one is slipping through the cracks. So first, I'm going to dive into the city case studies. So we analyzed over 50 cities across different metrics, including whether or not they have conducted a voluntary local review, if they're part of an international network like the Rainbow Cities or the Ciudades Arcoiris, if they are LGBTI friendly, if they have robust data collection systems, their replicability to Los Angeles, if they have strong programming, existing LGBTQIA+ governance structure like an office or a commission that's already set up, and if they have a pre-existing relationship with the LA Mayor's Office of International Affairs. And going through, like I said, over 50 cities, digging through lots of literature reviews and conducting interviews, we narrowed down to 7 cities that we completed case studies of, including Seattle, New York City, Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, Mannheim, and Barcelona. And we gave special consideration to equity and intentionality to include a diversity of cities from the global north and the global south. And we also looked closely for cities that had different approaches so we could provide a more robust array of case studies for Los Angeles. So the key findings that we found from these city case studies were that being part of an international LGBTI network like the Rainbow Cities or the Ciudades Arcoiris promotes city governments to develop policies, programs, and partnerships and prioritize the need of their LGBTQIA+ community. Membership also serves as a form of soft power as it globally signifies the city as a progressive LGBTQ-friendly environment. Cities that have an LGBTQIA+ office or agency, which is run by permanent staff members, have stronger programs and services and a greater ability to advocate for funding and its policies than commissions do. Third, that it is critical to prioritize intersectionality and LGBTQIA+ initiatives to guide city programming and to achieve equitable representation and services to the city's entire LGBTQIA+ community. Fourth, that staff and representatives will utilize their community connections to promote and create programs and services and gather information on the needs of LGBTQIA+ people. Fifth, that using language that is gender neutral and trans and non-binary inclusive on official reports and websites and in policies ensures equal representation of people of all gender identities. And finally, that many cities struggle to collect consistent data on their LGBTQIA+ population because of underfunding and federal regulations that prohibit questions regarding sexual orientation and gender identity. So we found that cities have worked with community organizations to design and promote voluntary surveys and have also collected qualitative data such as stories to guide their work. So for our second project, which was looking for indicators in LA's voluntary local review that could be disaggregated to see more closely the outcomes that LGBTQIA+ residents are facing. We began by looking into what would make an ideal indicator for data disaggregation in Los Angeles. So we began by piggybacking off of the 2019 Los Angeles Voluntary Local Review. In that review, there were 245 indicators that were tailored to the LA lived experience. And we sought to find indicators that would reflect the real lived experience of LGBTQIA+ people. So we conducted a literature review of what indicator measures would do that best. We also sought to use a localized data source so that it was centered around the LA experience. And we also were looking to capture multiple demographic identities and their outcomes that can measure queer experiences, and also make sure that the data sources are racially equitable. So we were looking then, after we completed this review of what the ideal indicator looks like, at how many data sources we could, or how many indicators we could disaggregate. So out of the 245 in the LA SDG voluntary review, we found 58 that were relevant based on our ideal, And then we found 20 from there that had valid data sources to justify disaggregation at this time. I'll draw from 4 valid data sources, which are localized, have an LGBTQIA+ demographic collected, and are reliably updated too, which is important. So an additional 7 indicators have budding data sources that can be looked into in the future. So we included those as well, along with our main 20 for next steps and as this work moves forward. So some examples of what indicators that we selected for disaggregation include the proportion of the population living below the national poverty line, the proportion of students who feel safe on school grounds, and coverage of essential health services. So it really covers a wide range of different health outcomes, and we're very excited about what we found. So our biggest takeaways from the project were that cities with LGBTQIA+ initiatives have stronger measures of impact, inclusion, and representation of queer communities than those that don't. And second, that collecting and reporting disaggregated data on LGBTQIA+ communities are part of achieving the LA Sustainable Development Goals. So all of this indicates that if LA wishes to leave no one behind, as laid out in their voluntary local review, continuing this line of work will support that goal of making Los Angeles a more inclusive place for our queer community. And then to go into some of my more personal professional development takeaways. One of the most powerful takeaways from this project for me was the power of local government. I think we often talk about national governments in classroom settings and in our news cycle, but there is so much space for innovation and experimentation of programs and policies at the local level, and more so than there is at a national scale or an international multilateral space. LA as a major city is in a unique position to move the tide forward on social issues such as LGBTQIA+ inclusion. So it was really exciting to see sustainable data-driven development firsthand, and to also feel the urgency of city staff to drive this positive change. Second, that I was able to work with a team situated all over the world. My specific team was all over the Americas in different time zones, and we, in our city case studies, interviewed professionals from cities all over the world in different languages. And beyond COVID and like the virtual limitations of COVID in the global health industry, this is such an important and reality that it was really, really useful to get experience working in that firsthand. I also was able to start learning the role of a consultant position. This is my first real experience in a consultant role, and I learned many soft skills about team dynamics, how to interface productively with a client, how to communicate well with such a large and diverse team, how to utilize the expertise of our faculty mentor, and also how to work within the structure and the requirements of the LA city government, and how to deliver a product that wasn't just useful to us, but would be useful for them. And then another outcome for me was translating big picture ideas into concrete steps that led into a final product. And I say this because the SDG Leadership Academy was an incredibly valuable experience with ambiguity, because we were presented with ideas and wishes from our client that were pretty abstract, and were left more on our own to figure out how to interpret those and how to deliver a final product that was significant and useful to the city. So we were able to compose our objectives, our project timeline, and our steps towards our final report with the help of our faculty mentor, Professor Gruskin. But it was a really great experience that I think you wouldn't get in the classroom, where there's so much more structure towards a project, that this was a much more real world experience. And finally, creating a 71-page final report that was both concise and accessible to readers, while still being technical and specific, was an incredible experience, and I feel set me up for a future where I would create a report like this again, because it's now a much more approachable and achievable goal than before doing that. So none of this would have been possible without the Institute and Professor Gruskin. So I am so grateful to have been part of this project and the Leadership Academy community. despite COVID, we were able to keep the needle moving on sustainable development in LA. And based on my experience working with this community, I see a very bright future for Los Angeles and beyond. So thank you all very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. And now we have Andrew, who is also part of the SDG Leadership Academy, but on a different project.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrew Luring, and I'm excited to talk with you all about my work under the SDG Leadership Academy. So my project specifically was tailored around looking at how we could reinvest in street assets and make these investments more equitable. So I'm going to give a little overview and talk about some of the background behind this project. So like Allison said, each team had a city client that you're specifically tasked with working with. So my city client was the local agency Streets LA. And what Streets LA does is that they manage street assets and street services around LA. So for a little bit of context, street assets are defined as above ground sidewalk and transit related amenities. And so the proposal that Streets LA set forth for us was that they wanted us to analyze existing distributions of street assets across LA. And due to COVID, Los Angeles as a city has had to have substantial budget cuts towards its local agencies. And so this necessitates a call for more targeted investment. And then also in light of the racial inequity in Los Angeles, especially brought in light of the Black Lives Matter protests last summer, Streets LA really wanted to make it a clear priority for us to have a social equity lens within the project we worked on. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the outcomes and what we accomplished with our project. So our team divided into two different workflows. We had a policy side, and so the two policy folks in our team worked to compile innovative street asset initiatives from different global cities. And we wanted to look at these cities, think about the different infrastructure and different programs they had in place, and look at which of their initiatives might be transferable to LA, given our political climate, given our environment, and given our current infrastructure. And now talking more about the aspect of the project that I worked on, I was in the data team workflow. And what we did was develop a street asset investment tool. So this tool was a collective of interactive data sets related to street asset distribution in Los Angeles. And so this image on the right side, one takeaway that we created for Streets LA as our client was to group assets into different thematic categories. And so as you can see, for example, under bikeability, we have bike racks and we have bikeways. And so consolidating these assets into thematic categories helped underlie which street assets would be beneficial for street specific neighborhoods based on different issues. And then from all of this, we created a mapping platform prototype using GIS technology. And this was directed for Street LA's use after our project. And then into all of this, we incorporated socioeconomic and racial equity metrics into the analysis. And so this map over here is a comprehensive visualization of all of the takeaways that we were able to create from our project. And so the pink areas are high priority investment areas. And so they represent areas that have greater socioeconomic need. So for example, these areas might have more low income households, or they might have more people living in these areas that are experiencing houselessness. And then concurrently, they also lack a lot of street asset infrastructure. And so because of this, we recommended to Streets LA that these specific areas be focused on for their investment in the future. And then conversely, the light blue areas represent the other side of the extreme. So they have low socioeconomic needs. So a lot of these areas are pretty affluent and pretty socioeconomically well off. And they have pretty ample street asset infrastructure built out. And so we used the results of this map and then other data-driven statistical analysis we conducted to determine 10 different high priority investment neighborhoods within Los Angeles that Streets LA could invest in. So now I'm going to talk in detail about some of the personal takeaways I had from the SDG Leadership Academy. So it was just truly an incredible experience for my personal and professional development last summer. And so the first aspect I'm going to talk about was just how tangible the deliverables we created felt in making an impact. And so for the SDG Academy, one of our tasks was to produce an academic paper and a blog post for the Academy. And the really exciting thing about the academic paper that my team worked on is that Streets LA really enjoyed the feedback and some of the findings that we were able to produce for them. So our advisors are actually currently working to get the paper published in some academic resources. And then talking more about Streets LA's enthusiasm for our work, they told us that they were planning to implement a lot of our findings and their future practices. And this is really exciting because it could directly affect how they allocate resources in the future and how they direct their budget in the future. And now touching on the second aspect of my personal takeaways, from the SDG Leadership Academy, I was able to get a way better understanding of how local government functions. I was able to understand specifically how Streets LA as a bureau operates, understand what kinds of projects they work on, understand what kind of workflows they have for these projects and what their process is. And then finally, just really understand how much impact LA's government has in shaping the city of Los Angeles. And then specifically talking about LA, LA was a really fantastic city to work with in promoting the SDGs because it's really a pioneer in aligning policy goals with SDGs on the local scale. There aren't many cities in the United States and in the world that do this kind of thing. And then finally, speaking about my last aspect, the last takeaway I got was really the power of cohort-based learning. Not all internships have this kind of program where you interact with so many students. We had different weekly meetings to check in. And so it was just really cool to have this kind of community around the internship built in last summer. And so I really recommend any student who's interested in this kind of program to explore it. There really were a diversity of opportunities related to researching the SDGs. I know other groups like Allison's group, for example, they explored LGBTQIA+ inclusion within the SDGs. There was another group that looked at biodiversity and another group that looked at veteran support systems. So just a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different topics. And then a lot of the guest speakers we had, again, they came from really diverse backgrounds. And so we had the director of Skid Row Strategy, for example, come speak with us, or the chief data officer of LA come speak with us. And then finally, my last sub point within this is just really how cool it was to be around a community that really had a passion for social justice and social equity. The SDG Leadership Academy, because the students were really interested in having a space for this, created a space to have conversations about structural racism. And then it really just was empowering to see how many other students were passionate in their activism for social issues. And so just to wrap this all up, I wanted to reiterate, really grateful for this opportunity under the SDG Leadership Academy. And just for anybody who's interested, I really encourage them to apply for opportunities like the Academy or any other opportunities associated with the Institute. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Andrew. And we have Abigail from the SDG Leadership Academy also working on a different project.
Hi, everybody. My name is Abby Martichenko. And just to give you a little background about myself, I'm a sophomore at USC. I'm majoring in journalism. And this past summer, I was also part of the SDG Leadership Academy. And to be completely honest with you, at the start of the program, I didn't really know what it meant to be a part of the SDG Leadership Academy, but now that I do, I can't wait to share a little bit about my experience and tell you what you can expect if you also find yourself as part of this program. Okay, so a little bit about my project. So the project I was accepted to work on is the Community Index and Storytelling Project. Plain and simple, our team's objective was centered around building a greater understanding of what the Sustainable Development Goals are and how these goals are related to LA. So while our objective was to build visibility of the SDGs in LA, we also wanted to recognize and celebrate organizations that are actively embracing the SDGs and that are building a more equitable future right here in LA, even if the organizations don't know of these goals or even if they don't use any of the SDG language. So phase one of the project focused on expanding an already existing activities index, which is on the Mayor's Office of Los Angeles website. This is a living database of different organizations in Los Angeles, all of which are actively advancing the SDGs. So we wanted to identify these leading organizations, add them to the index so that the public can have a greater understanding of what the SDGs are and which organizations in our city are working toward them. In order to populate this index activity with more organizations, the question that we had to consider is, how do we identify which organizations are advancing the SDGs in LA? And to answer this, we created a standardized index methodology, which is just a really fancy name for a document that tells us what we should look for when we are indexing organizations and which SDGs these organizations correlate to. As phase two, we created visibility pieces for organizations that are major players in advancing the SDG work. Each member of our team was tasked with making contact with an organization that correlated to a specific goal. We developed a set of interview questions based on the work of each organization. And finally, we created our respective visibility pieces. We worked hard to ensure that the organizations and projects that we selected were representative of diverse communities, as the SDGs, of course, are centered around equity. Awesome. So to talk a little bit about the outcomes of our project, we added 102 new organizations into our activities index, and I'm going to go show you guys a screen recording of the index in a moment. And we ended up with 9 visibility pieces. Obviously, with COVID, there are a lot of restrictions. Most of us weren't in LA. We were operating virtually. We couldn't conduct in-person interviews, and a lot of the organizations were grappling with their own challenges related to COVID and didn't have time to be interviewed. And for this reason, we ended up with 9, although in my opinion, this gave us the time to really develop our pieces and highlight the incredible work that these organizations do. So as you can see, watching the video, you can filter through projects and organizations that exist across a variety of sectors, whether that's government, private sector, nonprofits, or philanthropy. And you can learn about the work that they're doing and how this correlates to SDG goals. And you can also go visit their website and get connected to them. Additionally, you can actually, organizations or projects can come onto this website and log themselves so that they exist in this database, and so it's always active and always growing. To talk a little bit about the blog posts or the visibility posts, I'm going to plug my piece really quickly. This is the piece that I worked on. So I was highlighting SDG 8, which focuses on economic growth and decent work for all. I actually ended up interviewing and speaking with a representative at Homeboy Industries. They're an incredible major player that works on empowering and healing and providing opportunities to those in underserved and vulnerable communities, specifically former gang members and the formerly incarcerated. So this is the first 2 pages of the piece that I wrote. It was a great way for me to own my interviewing skills, develop my narrative storytelling, and also combining photos and graphics. So I really, really enjoyed working on this piece from start to finish. Here is a little graph showing all the 9 profiled organizations that we highlighted, as well as the correlating SDG. You can see that we had a range of organizations that were all advancing different goals. And I think that it really allowed us to have a chance to profile organizations that as individuals we had a passion for. So that was a really cool part of working on this team. And lastly, just to talk a little bit about the personal and professional development that I experienced. I think last summer for a lot of us was a difficult and isolating time, and it definitely still feels overwhelming to think about our future or to find opportunities that are a good fit for us. But it was a really incredible virtual way to still connect with my own personal and professional passions. And so firstly, I learned a ton about team collaboration. My team had to work together to populate our activities index, to create presentations, communicate in group meetings. I think it's an awesome way to connect with other intelligent and driven people, and also own your interpersonal and listening skills, which are really important qualities in your career. I also had a chance to expand on my research and writing skills. But more importantly, through my time at the Academy, I learned so much about Los Angeles and the organizations doing critical work in my own community. As college students, it's so important that we understand the ecosystems that we're settling into. And I really enjoyed researching and writing about and talking with inspiring people who are doing important work in the community that I can now call home. Lastly, it was a great way for me to make contact with people that are working with organizations that in the future I would love to be connected with. I was personally really happy to profile an organization that works on narrowing disparities in the criminal justice system, and I hope to get involved with them in the future. So as the other SDG Leadership Academy participants said, you learn so much about the public sector, and it gives you a really practical and realistic look into a career that you may want to pursue in the future. So I'm very thankful for my time at the Academy, for all the people I met, all the people I learned from, and wherever this will lead me in the future. So if you have any questions, I would love to answer them at any point. So thank you all for listening.
Great. Thank you, Abby. And now we have our last student speaker, who is Gaia Morales, part of the Student Advisory Council and also the SDG Leadership Academy in a totally different capacity.
Thank you, Will. Hi, everyone. So my name is Gaia Morales, and I'm extremely grateful to be here to round out the Student Symposium. Just to introduce myself, I am co-president of the Student Advisory Council with the Institute on Inequalities and Global Health alongside Haley Robertson. I am a second-year PhD student in political science and international relations at Dornsife, and my research interests span the local global institutional linkages, especially as they relate to the domain of sustainable development and global environmental governance policy. And I've been a member of SAC since I started my program in the fall of 2019. So the Student Advisory Council began in 2018 as really an opportunity for students to not only access unique resources from the Institute, but also to help shape and inform programming and opportunities in ways that really best serve the broader USC community. And in the spirit of its mission, the council consists of a really multidisciplinary group. And as you can see on this slide, we represent more than 7 different schools across USC. We meet once a month to discuss current and future programming that covers cross-cutting issues that intersect with global health, including sexuality and gender rights, sustainability and urban health, and communication, technology, and innovation. So these are just the themes that I just mentioned. And here are just 2 examples of a handful of events that we've co-sponsored with IIGH this past fall of 2020, one of which was a lunch and learn by a member of SAC, PhD candidate Avery Everhart. So this is also an example of how membership in SAC offers avenues for professional development and sharing your research and your interests with the broader USC community. Joining SAC on a more personal note has been one of my most grounding and meaningful experiences since I've joined the USC community. It has allowed me to collaborate and connect with really passionate students, as well as experts across campus, such as Dr. Gruskin, Dr. Ferguson, and Dr. Kumar. And I've also been able to play a part in spreading information on IIGH resources and events to an even broader audience. All right, one of the IIGH opportunities very close to my heart is the SDG Leadership Academy. As you've now heard from Allison, Andrew, and Abby in great detail, all with whom I've been extremely fortunate to work last summer, I want to provide more of a bird's eye view of the experience. So for a little more context, the SDG Leadership Academy is an extension of an ongoing academic public partnership with the city of Los Angeles, particularly the Mayor's Office of International Affairs. And that began in the fall of 2018 with the Wicked Problems Practicum. And a little on that, this practicum, not unlike SAC actually, brought together students from various disciplines to serve as consultants to the mayor's office, primarily by conducting, in this phase, a human rights analysis of the work occurring at the time to combat the homelessness crisis. And this past summer was the most recent phase of the partnership, in which USC students, like the ones you've heard from today, collaborated with students from Occidental College, Arizona State University, Pomona College, and UCLA. There were 9 teams, each working with a specific city client to meet ongoing city needs. So everything from LA Sanitation, the Office of Biodiversity, the Mayor's Office of International Affairs, and the Department of Transportation as well. Students had a chance to work with different departments within the city government. And like I said, you've heard from folks who worked on that first project on LGBTQIA+ populations in the SDGs, from the Community Index project and the Street Asset Investment Decision Tool. But the summer as a whole really covered a wide range of issues and worked with numerous clients within the city government for a bigger picture. My role was a little different, so I'll talk a little bit about what my role was in the context of the SDG Academy and the partnership as a whole. It was a little different from students who worked directly through the Academy, and I have been extremely fortunate to have been involved as a student researcher when Los Angeles efforts to localize the SDGs were first announced in early 2018. And so this last summer, I served a different role as a program coordinator, which involved aiding the cohort in maneuvering our virtual reality, as you've mentioned, such as in programming guest speakers and cohort-wide events, and working across all 9 project teams to provide both logistical and substantive support to meet our city clients' expectations. And I was really drawing from and informed by my past experiences researching the localization process, or the process by which Los Angeles took on the Sustainable Development Goals and adopted it to fit the needs of the city, and as well as working with and managing student research teams. And this project really is, as you've heard, just reinforcing the point that my previous symposium speakers had mentioned, that it's really a critical example of the potential of global frameworks to inform local policymaking, but also the importance of and value of engaging youth perspectives in academic institutions in pursuit of more equitable and just outcomes in our urban spaces. And so the SDG framework and the SDG Academy allows us to develop partnerships and recognize the ways in which local contexts can really better respond to these cross-cutting issues within the broader umbrella of sustainable development. And these values and ideals are very much aligned with that of the Student Advisory Council and the broader vision of the Institute on Inequalities in Global Health. And I want to end on what has been most meaningful across both of my experiences with SAC and the SDG Academy, and that is really the hands-on learning and community engagement both opportunities have provided. As a PhD student, most of my time and energy has been devoted to research and learning enough to publish my own work. And I also tend to communicate primarily with other students in my discipline and my faculty mentors as a result. And these opportunities really pushed me to go beyond my circles and to build connections and learn from other students, from local and visiting professionals and scholars, both within and beyond the USC community. Opportunities to directly contribute to the policy-making process, to directly link my research interests to goals and planning has been an incredibly unique and rewarding experience. And so I highly encourage anyone who is interested to keep a lookout for future opportunities, both with working with SAC and the SDG Academy. And so if you have any questions or interest in either SAC and the SDG Academy, please feel free to reach out to me, and thank you for your attention.
If anyone has any questions about these opportunities, please send us an email. You can also join our listserv where we announce all these amazing opportunities. This is just a snapshot into a few of those opportunities that we try and offer each year to students. Thank you, every single one of our student speakers. Y'all did a fantastic job. And everyone take care and be safe.